to see the Irish government bring the directive into Irish law?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Gordon, and it's one that I get asked all the time. So the NIS2, Network Information Security Directive version 2, is a directive, and an EU directive is unlike a regulation, which the GDPR is. So a regulation is a common, if you want to paraphrase it, it's a common law that will be put across all member states in the EU. So it'll apply the same way across all the EU. So if you're a regulation, if you're in France, Germany, Ireland, Denmark, it's basically the same law, but in each member state. A directive is a higher level type approach, if you like, where each member state then takes the directive and applies it as local law into the member state. Now, that might be a combination of existing laws or creating new laws. So the problem we have, or the challenge we have with NIS2, and we'll talk about in the presentation, is that it is due to be implemented and enforced by the 17th of October. So we have to be compliant with NIS2 by the 17th of October this year. But unfortunately, we have no information or no details yet from the Irish government as to how they're going to transpose the NIS2 directive into Irish law. So we have no details yet as to how the law is going to be implemented here in Ireland, which obviously makes it a bit of a challenge for us to understand what best to do. So, for example, who are going to be the regulators, who are going to be reporting the supervisory authorities, etc. We don't have details on those yet. However, if that's not in place, if we don't have Irish laws in place to support the directive, the core of the directive will apply anyway. So if you're going to be a regulated entity, don't be waiting for the Irish laws to come. Work off the NIS2 directive, and it'll be there. Once the laws become more available, more apparent, then we can work through that. So sorry, that was quite a long answer to a relatively simple question. Apologies for that.
No problem, and in fact, I think that's probably something we'll return to, but it's worth framing it, and just I think you make a really good point at the end that not to wait around for this, but to prepare anyway. So with that,
Right.
let's kick off the presentation, and then, as I said at the end, if you have any questions to the audience there, please do leave them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of them as we can before we wrap up the webinar today.
Okay, thanks, Gordon. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully that's coming through okay. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time today to attend this webinar. So the title of the webinar is Navigating the NIS2 Directive, the Network Information Security Directive. And I suppose just like any navigation or any journey, it's often good to know where you are and where you're trying to head towards. So this is the Network Information Security Directive. So as you can see from the screen there, 2016, NIS, as it is now, as the original Network Information Security Directive, came into force in 2016. December 2022, NIS2 was agreed and published in the official journal. January 2023, NIS2 comes into effect, and October 2024 is the deadline for member states to adopt and publish NIS2 measures into national law. And we are just here in July 2024, so we're kind of very close to that October deadline. As I said in the intro, if the Irish government haven't published the measures in international law, you should work from the NIS2 directive itself. Do note that, like all things, times changed, technology changes, environments change. So there will be a revision again of NIS2 in October. They'll probably come up with a very imaginative name and call it NIS3, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And there are three main pillars in NIS2. So you've got two two pillars on both sides of the screen. So on the left-hand side, you've got the member state responsibilities. So that means a member state such as Ireland has certain responsibilities under NIS2. That is to set up national authorities, develop national strategies, put a coordinated vulnerability disclosure framework in place, and put crisis management frameworks in place. So they all have to be put in to support NIS2. On the other side, at the European level, is the cooperation and info exchange. So I suppose one of the key tenets of NIS2 is that it wants to enable Europe, sorry, not Europe, but the EU to have a more coordinated and higher level of cooperation among member states when it comes to cybersecurity. Because given today's world and how we all do business now, and we're all interconnected, an attack against facilities, for example, in Germany, could lead to issues here in Ireland. Or if you take Ireland as probably a good example, given the amount of data centers and cloud service providers that are based here, if there was a major attack against the Ireland's infrastructure, power infrastructure, communications infrastructure, etc., that could result in those systems being offline or being impacted in any way, shape, or form, that's going to impact EU-wide, if not globally. So Ireland, if we're facing an attack that size, probably wouldn't be able to cope with it by itself. But the NIS2 framework and the cooperation info exchange will hopefully provide us with that platform where we can coordinate responses EU-wide to deal with major threats. Now, from a company point of view, and for those majority of you on this webinar today, here it is more focused on companies or organizations that are going to be regulated by NIS2. I suppose the key thing is to take away is that there's going to be a bigger focus in NIS2 on risk management from a cyber security point of view. So what are your risk management strategies in place? How do you manage your risks? How do you ensure your controls are effective? How do you ensure they're working? And how are you improving on dealing with risks on an ongoing basis? Another big change is going to be accountability for top management for non-compliance. So that's senior management, boards, etc., will be held responsible for non-compliance. It's just going to be the organization. It's not just going to be the IT team. It's top management are part of this as well. Essential and important companies, and we'll cover that definition later on as to what's just between an essential company and an important company, are going to be required to take basic minimal security measures. So NIS2, unlike NIS version 1, stipulates certain measures that you have to take and have in place. So you're going to be expected to do that. And there's also going to be a notification and breach notification within given timelines. And again, we'll cover that later on in the later slides. So I want to talk to you today is to see, well, okay, on the left-hand side, you can see that's what NIS look like. NIS 1, I'm going to call it to keep it simple, and how it's expanded to cover more entities under NIS 2. So why did we expand? You know, why was it expanded? Why is it needed? Why is NIS 2 needed? What's new and how does it affect to companies and how does it affect them and what should you do next? Okay, so there are the areas we're going to go through. So what was required? Well, I suppose, as I said in response to Gordon's question, a directive means that every member state applies it and transpose it into their own national laws. And the idea would be that that transposition would be kind of similar across every member state. But in reality, that didn't work. Different member states chose the original NIS directive differently. So this is particularly challenging for organizations that would have operations across many different member states. So, you'd be if you're based in Ireland and you've got operations as well in France or the Netherlands or Italy, etc. Now you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do we need to do in Ireland to comply with the the transposition of the NIS laws? What do we need to do in Italy to do it? And it became quite difficult for companies to manage that. The types of organizations we viewed as critical has changed, and we'll go through that as well later on. But for example, 2016, I don't think we would have deemed many of the large social media providers, etc., as being critical to society. But we've seen that over years, it's, social media platforms have become more integrated into people's daily personal and business lives, and we rely on them much more. Technology has changed. We've got increase in automation, artificial intelligence, smart devices, etc. So there's been change in technology. Cybersecurity has changed. The threats we're facing have changed. The technology we're using has changed. We've moved from 10, 15 years ago, where the network was viewed as having a perimeter within buildings, are similar to what buildings were to. Now there's cloud computing, mobile devices, the COVID pushing things forward as well in that area, in that the security landscape has changed. And the cyber attacks have changed, but as well, we've seen a large increase in disruptive attacks, and we see new technologies such as AI being used in attacks. And where I see AI being used in attacks is at the moment is looking at ways to look at vulnerabilities in software or to produce more efficient emails. So cyber attacks have changed, therefore how we protect against them needs to change as well. So who does NIS2 affect, and how does it affect them? Okay, so on the left-hand side here of the screen, you can see that we have on a NIS2 is the original entities that were being managed by were being regulated by NIS1, with the energy sector, transport, banking, the financial market infrastructure, healthcare, drinking water, digital infrastructure, as I said, social media, digital service providers. That's all changing, as well. They are still covered by NIS2, but in addition, on the right-hand side, we've got these areas. So those involved in the production of food, for example. Certain manufacturing types are included there, particularly if they're doing with computers or medical and stuff like that. Postal and courier services are covered. Providers of public electronic communication networks or services, so social media platforms, communication platforms, etc. ICT service management. So with the huge growth over the past few years in managed service providers, be that managed IT service providers, and indeed managed cybersecurity providers, so managed security operations providers, etc. They're now coming under the remit of NIS2. Wastewater, waste management, public administration, those who work in the space industry, research industry, and chemicals, those who mix and manufacture chemicals, have now come under NIS2 as well. So you can see that has expanded quite a lot. And, I think I read somewhere saying that NIS2 probably impacted hundreds of organizations, and the original NIS impacted hundreds of organizations in Ireland. NIS2 is going to impact thousands, directly going to impact thousands as well. Under NIS1, we had the phrases operators of essential services and digital providers. So that has been replaced by two different phrases now. These are the these are now the essential sector and the important sector. And we go that in more detail. So if the organization provides services or carries out activities in the EU, it's in a particular industry sectors over different types of numbers and turnover. That's how the definition happens. So if you provide services in any of these sectors here in this column here under essential services, so energy, transport, banking, financial markets, health, drinking or wastewater, digital infrastructure, so DNS providers, etc., ICT service management, public administration, space, you're now in the essential sector. And particularly if you're over employees of 250, 50 million turnover, over 43 million euro balance. You're in the important sector if you're in any of these sectors here, and your employee number and turnover and balance meets these thresholds here as well. So that's how you know whether you're in the essential sector or the important sector. So you could be in the energy sector, but if your business is 100 employees and your turnover is less than 50 or 43 million, you're not being, NIS2 does not apply to you. But if you are over those thresholds, then it does. 250, 15 members there. If your turnover is greater than 43 million balance at 10 months, it's 10 million to 43 million euro balance, it implies to you as well. And this is a great resource. It's actually from a document published by the National Cybersecurity Centre here in Ireland. So it's actually up on the website, ncsc.gov.ie. It's a very good, simple guide that gives lots of good information in it. I strongly recommend you download because it's vendor free, it's vendor agnostic, and it is coming from probably one of the bodies that will be a regulator underneath NIS2. So if you're in the so here, if you're in the sectors here or subsectors, gives you more information on what it is. And then if you're in the thresholds, it marks you down as where you are. So if you're in the energy sector, for example, so you're in district heating, cooling, gas, hydrogen, oil, recharging services. If you have more than 250 employees or more than 50 million in revenue, you are an essential entity. If you've less than that, you're an important. Okay, you can work through it there. If you're in any of these sectors here, this is a great way to understand where it may impact you, where NIS2 may. The other big change in NIS2 is the whole area that the focus changes particularly onto risk management, but not just risk management in your own organization, but risk management in your supply chain. So there's two areas. I'm not going to read all those out to you because I won't insult your intelligence that you can read just as good as me. But the boat recitals talk about that. The regulated entities have to manage the cyber risk in their supply chain, particularly if there's suppliers of data storage and processing services or managed security services providers and software editors. So if that's your business and you are providing those services to any of these regulated entities here, you're going to be asked by those customers of yours to demonstrate and prove that you have appropriate security controls in place to manage their cybersecurity risk. So what I mean by that is we're probably going to see a lot more audits, requests from regulated bodies into their supply chain as to how you are managing cybersecurity on their behalf, how you're managing your risk. And in turn, they'll probably be asking you how you're managing your supply chain. So even if you're not in the first link of that supply chain into those providers, you could be, you know, you could get similar requests from somebody else in that supply chain that you're supplying into. So in my opinion, NIS2 is going to have a major impact, not just on the regulated entities, but also on lots of businesses that provide services into those regulated entities. So don't don't be looking at this slide here thinking, oh, my company's not in there, my organization's not in there. I don't need to worry about NIS2. I'll wait to the end of I'll hang on and talk to the end of the webinar because it sounds interesting. But I'm afraid if you have a customer that's in this sector, or you have a customer who provides services into this sector, you will be impacted by this because you will be required to demonstrate that you have appropriate security controls in place to manage your cybersecurity risk, because the regulated entity at the top of that chain needs to ensure it's managing its cyber risk as well throughout its supply chain. So it's going to impact, you know, what the impact NIS2 will have. Well, it's going to impact from many different ways. A lot of the headlines we hear, and it's similar to when GDPR was coming out, it's all about fines. You know, what could the fines be? You know, non-compliance of fines can be up to 10 million euro or 2% of worldwide revenue. That's what's going to hit the headlines. But there are other impacts non-compliance or failure to comply with can lead. You're going to have, you know, potential reputational impact if you're not compliant. Your client relationship, if you are have an issue, you may have to notify clients that you've had a cybersecurity incident. Now, you know, personally, I'm in favor of breach notifications and being aware of what's going on. But you know, many of these breaches happen because you haven't been taking the appropriate measures to protect your resources. That's not going to look at it, you know. There's going to be compliance costs, and I have a next slide, some information on that. And you know, that's going to go through your supply chain as well. So there's going to be a big impact, not just on fines, but also on costs in compliance, potential reputational damage, and then there are consequences with personal liability towards senior management in the organization. So again, it's taken cybersecurity away from the IT department or the cybersecurity team, and it's placing it firmly where it belongs, at the senior management and boards as well. And this is some figures from Ernst & Young, focusing on cybersecurity in Europe and challenges regarding NIS2 directive. So they estimate that for any businesses that are coming under the umbrella of being regulated by NIS2, there's going to be an increase in costs of approximately 25% on your IT spending. If you already are a regulated body, you could have an increase in cost of 15%. Now, probably a bit late to be seeing those figures, given that you're going to have to be compliant by October of this year, and no doubt you're probably halfway through your budget already. But I would suggest we need to start planning budget-wise and investment-wise on how you're going to implement the appropriate security controls and risk management controls to comply with NIS2 from October onwards, and next year and other years as well. So what's new in NIS2 compared to NIS1? So as we just discussed, there are more sectors and entities being impacted, being directly impacted. Once the competent authorities have been identified by the Irish government, and depending on which industry you're in, you're probably going to face it. So, you know, I think the National Cybersecurity Centre obviously will be one of those competent authorities that will probably be focusing on critical infrastructure and governments. We may have central bank being the competent authority for NIS2 for its regulated entities in the financial sector, and there may be one or two other competent authorities being appointed as well. We don't know the details yet, so unfortunately, that's instant notification deadlines. I'll be going that in the next slide, but you know, a key thing with NIS2 is that if you become aware of an incident, 24 hours notify your supervisory authority, your competent authority. So 24 hours is a lot of time. People talked about 72 hours being too short for GO. We now have 24 hours, which is going to be a bigger challenge. There's going to be enhanced regulatory supervision, so that's going to be more fines and more offences, and probably more audits and revisions and reviews done by the regulatory bodies. Stricter risk management requirements. So again, going to have to be able to demonstrate that you have good, proactive, and comprehensive cyber risk management requirements in place. I have done reviews of companies, and when I ask the question, do you have cyber risk management in place? And they go, oh, we absolutely, yes, here's our risk register. And it's often a risk register of all the operational and IT risks for a business. And there's might be one line, we could be hacked. And that's the cybersecurity risk management. It's going to have to be a lot more detailed than that, I'm afraid. So be prepared for that. Personal responsibility. I think this is a big game changer. Going and talking to your board and your senior management and telling them, you as senior management are personally responsible now for ensuring that we are compliant with NIS2 is really going to put more focus on cybersecurity. Hopefully that's a good thing for those of us working in that area, and that we're getting more budget, more resources, and more support to get initiatives done. So hopefully that will work out. And then, as we just discussed as well, the whole supply chain and supplier relations is going to be much more stringently managed and impact as well. You're going to have to, regular entities are going to have to demonstrate that they are managing cyber risk in their supply chain. So say instant notification. If you suspect or you believe you've had a breach, you've got 24 hours to report it. Now, you don't need to give details. It's just an early warning. Hi, we think we have a security breach. We're investigating it. We'll be back to you. And then you've got 72 hours to assess it, the severity and everything else, and provide that back to company 72 hours. That instant notification. Sorry, we didn't have a breach, but it also would be obviously more, yes, here's more details on what's going on. And then working with the competent authority, you'll be working with intermediate status reports, and then it's looking for a final report of the incident, you know, details of what happened, how the breach happened, etc., within 1 month. So we're going to see, as I said again, governance and personal responsibility is accountability goes from, you know, the security team is no longer can be solely responsible for non-compliance. Senior management executives can be gross found fine cybersecurity engines. So management can be mandated to publicly disclose incidents or the identity of legal persons responsible for non-compliance. So that can, you know, that is a big shift in focus. So we talked about the 10 million euro, 2% of global turnover fine, whichever is the maximum of either. So these are the other things that can happen. You can be issued with a warning for non-compliance, or there's competent authority can give you binding instructions. You can be told to cease doing what you're doing because it's non-compliant. So if your business is relying on a certain business process or a certain way of operating, and it's found not to be compliant, the competent authority can turn around and start to say, sorry, you cannot do that anymore. So that is a big impact on your business. To bring risk management measures in you can be audited to make sure you've got proper risk management measures in place. You could be ordered to inform the natural person and legal person, so breach notifications. You will be ordered or could be ordered to implement recommendations as a result of an audit. So the authority could come in, do an audit, and say you have to do these things. You do have to designate a monitoring officer. You may also have to make public aspects of non-compliance. So again, from a reputation point of view, think the damage that could do to your organization to sort of go public, say, yeah, look, we're not compliant with NIS2 because of these particular areas here. Fines can be imposed. If there's any essential entity certification or authorization concerning the service, can be suspended. And this is the one coming back to the personal liability. Those responsible for charge and managerial responsibility as chief executive officer or legal representative level can be temporarily prohibited from exercising managerial functions. Think about that. Your CEO could be told you can't be CEO anymore, or words to that effect. So it is a lot. There's a lot of penalties potentially there as well. And this is what NIS2 is looking for. It's been more specific on what it's requiring from a cybersecurity point of view. So it's essential and important entities should adopt a wide range of basic cyber hygiene practices, such as zero trust principles, software updates, device configuration, network segmentation, identity access management, user awareness, and organized training for the staff. So there's a whole lot of stuff there that it's looking for you to put in place. Specifically, what it's looking for, what NIS2 is looking for, is that you've got effective risk answers and information security in place, instant handling in place, business continuity measures, so resilience in place, your supply chain security is there, security in systems acquisition, development, and maintenance, so secure coding principles, security by design, etc. Policies and procedures to assess the effectiveness of cybersecurity risk management, basic computer hygiene and training, so antivirus software, patching, etc., using appropriate encryption and proper encryption as well, having human resources security, access control policies, asset management, awareness training, etc., and then the use of multi-factor authentication as well should be in place. Management bodies of essential and important entities must also approve the adequacy of the cybersecurity measurement risk. So when we talk about cyber risk, it's not just the cybersecurity team or the IT team doing the risk assessments and nobody has seen them. These have to be signed off by the management bodies. They need to supervise the implementation of the risk management measures and make sure they are basically there. Follow training. So they need to be aware and knowledgeable about cybersecurity. And so they will need to get maybe particular training to make them understand a bit more comprehensively. May have awareness training for staff and be accountable for any non-compliance as well. So when it comes to risk management, what we recommend here in BH Consulting is that you take these particular steps, is that you identify what it is you're trying to protect. So asset management, your business environment, governance and risk assessment, how you're going to do your risk assessment, what your risk assessment strategy is, how you're going to protect them based on your risk assessment. So what controls you're going to have in place, awareness training, data security, etc. What detection you're going to have in place for when those controls don't work. There is no such thing as 100% security, despite how much money you're going to spend in preventive measures and protective measures in cybersecurity. Eventually, they can be bypassed. So what you need to have is appropriate controls in place to detect when those controls are being attempted to be circumvented or failing, and then have the ability to respond quickly and effectively and identify a breach, respond to the breach in an appropriate way, and then recover appropriately from it as well. So a key thing is you're going to need to look at your whole incident management review. So there is that traditional 7-step approach to incident management, which again, we adhere to here in BH Consulting and work with our clients on developing that. Is how do you detect an incident? And once you detect it, how do you respond to it? How do you mitigate the impact of the event as it's happening? How do you keep reporting back to the appropriate bodies? So remember, you're going to have to report to the competent authority, but you're probably also going to have to report to your own management board and other people in the business to keep them up to date as well. And another thing, sorry, to slightly sidetrack here is other regulations will also impact here. And this too doesn't supersede other regulations such as GDPR, etc. So if you do have a breach that is covered under NIS2, but also under GDPR, you're going to have to make two separate breach notifications, one to the competent authority for NIS2 and the other to the Data Protection Commissioner for GDPR. So sorry, that's just a little sidetrack there, and it's something that people tend to overlook. You could have a lot of reporting requirements to look at, and you need to understand them there as well. And then your recovery strategy, how are you going to recover your systems and how are you going to remediate, make sure that the attackers can't get back in again. And very critical, what are the lessons learned? You know, during a crisis, during an instance, and we've helped clients get through some very serious incidents. Everybody is adrenaline fueled, working hard. There's lack of sleep. You know, communications needs to be coherent, etc. And if you leave it too long to learn your lesson, to do your lessons learned review, you can forget about some of the good stuff you could have picked up at and ways to improve security to go along. So lessons learned is critically important, and that should always feed back into the loop at the beginning as well. Now, NIS2 in the documentation itself does say any steps companies take to comply should consider compliance with international standards. The technical guidelines issued by the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity map each security objective to several best practice standards, including ISO 27001. So my recommendation to many organizations, if NIS2 is going to impact you directly or even indirectly because you're in that supply chain, you should give serious consideration to getting certified to ISO 27001, because that is a very independent way for you to demonstrate to your customers, to your competent authorities, and to your management that you have taken the best practices approach to cybersecurity. And by being certified that, you can demonstrate that independently, as opposed to say, trust me, I'm a professional, I have everything under control, don't worry, you can sleep easy. Well, at least if you're certified to 27001, it's an independent audit provided by a certification body that you can hold up and say, look, well, A, it gives you the confidence that you have things in place properly, and then you can present that to senior management, etc., and give them the confidence of what they need to do. So look, that was our lightning trip through navigating NIS2. You know, covered entities have until the 7th of October to align to NIS2. You need to look at making sure you've got the ability to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover from cyber incidents, and the cornerstones required for NIS2 and resilience. And there can be severe financial, personal, and reputational sanctions imposed in an organization, which are basically there to underpin the whole area of NIS2. So thanks for that. Gordon, I'll hand you back to you to see if there's any questions that people may have.
And indeed, there are, Brian. There's been fantastic response in the Q&A. And let's start. I'm going to go through them selectively, but some of them cover the same thing. Let's pick up on a point you made just right towards the end when you talked about the importance of getting certified to a standard like ISO 27001. Some of our questioners are asking, if a company is already certified, does that cover you? Does that mean you meet and exceed NIS2 requirements?
Well, I don't know if I can say you've exceeded NIS2 requirements, and you need to make sure that the scope of your certification covers what you're providing under the NIS2, that if that makes sense. Sorry. Because I have seen situations where people say, yeah, we're certified to 27001, but the scope is a data center in France and the business you're dealing with is in Ireland. So, you know, the scope has to be applicable. But yes, is there 27001 is probably the best standard to look at the moment for compliance with NIS2.
Okay, thank you. And another question from our panel here: will SMEs have to register with the Competence Authority?
Depending on how further, if they are directly covered by the laws as a transposed into Irish law. So unfortunately, the question is we'll have to wait and see. If you are an SME and you are essential there or an important, you probably will, but we have to wait and see what uh, uh, the transposition of NIS2 into Irish law will mean.
Okay, I'm just conscious we're coming right up to the time, but we're going to go a little bit over because there are some great questions here that it would be fantastic to answer while we're on the call. Another question here: what level, depth, or duration of training for leaders and staff is recommended? It was one thing that came across loud and clear in your presentation. It was that sense of responsibility moving up from the security team or the IT team to senior management to the board. So, any thoughts on the level of training they're going to need to address this and to understand the risk?
I think there's one way to if you're looking at the senior management of the board, one of the big challenges you have with people at that level is getting time to train them. So I do think they need to be aware of NIS2. So you're going to need to have maybe have a session with them to make them aware of NIS2 and what their obligations are under NIS2. But I think you also maybe a good way for companies to overcome maybe the lack of knowledge at that senior level is to ensure that there's regular presentations from cybersecurity experts into the senior management team or the board, or indeed that they get cyber experts to come in and keep the board abreast and updated on what is going on in cybersecurity. That actually is something that we do for several of our clients at the board level. Is we are in the cybersecurity sounding board, if you like, for the board.
Got it. Okay. We had a question. I'll just jump back to the start to make sure we're not missing anything. We were asked, why has it taken so long for the second revision?
Well, I think we all see that EU doesn't work very quickly, that these are laws and you do have to get uh, agreement across 27 member states as you develop these. But don't forget, NIS is only out since 2016 and we're now, what, 8 years later, we're now putting in place NIS2. The original data protection framework directive came out in the late 1990s, I believe, and it was only until 2018 that we actually had GDPR. So these things can take time.
Fair enough, absolutely. It's now again coming back to a question on organization size. We have one. Am I right to think that a credit union with assets of 140 million euro and fewer than 50 employees does not come into the scope for NIS2?
Potentially, but again, we have to wait and see what uh, how the government transposes that law and how the Central Bank of Ireland will interpret it as well.
Okay, and then invariably, this being an EU law, so there's always going to be a question involving the UK or referring to Brexit in some form. Will NIS2 apply to processing or business activities within the UK? So, for example, an Irish headquartered organisation that operates in the UK. This questioner is saying they're asking about the scope of the application for data subjects, or is that not a correct equivalent here?
Okay, so NIS2 doesn't have data subjects. That's a GDPR issue. So the UK under Brexit did commit that they would keep their legal frameworks in line with EU frameworks. So, for example, their Data Protection Act is going to be kept in line with GDPR, and they have said they will have their version of NIS in line with NIS 2. So what that actually means, if you're an Irish operation with providing services into the UK that falls under their version of NIS, you will have two regimes to comply with. You have the EU/Irish NIS2 regime, and you're going to have the UK NIS regime. Now, the opposite applies as well. If you're a UK business operating out of the UK and providing services into the EU, you're going to have to provide, comply with UK domestic NIS2 laws and also with the EU NIS2 directive if you're providing services into EU member states.
Okay, so
Brexit is it's the gift that keeps on giving.
you took the words right out of my mouth. Okay, we have a question about the professional sanctions. Can you please elaborate? Did you say that legal representatives could be suspended from practice for their company's failure to comply with NIS2? As an in-house counsel, this would be a concern.
Uh, I don't know if it applies to legal counsel, but specifically in the slides that we talked about, it called out the CEO and senior management. So as a CEO, you could be suspended for a period of time while it's looked at. Yeah.
Okay, and then certification is a theme that keeps cropping up again and again. So we have a question here. Do you foresee, Brian, that there could be a course that issues maybe a recognized certification that an attendee, such as, for example, a senior manager or board member, shows or demonstrates, yes, I now understand NIS2, I understand my obligations and what I'm liable for?
Uh, yeah, we're falling into the murky area of cybersecurity certification schemes and bodies and stuff like that. I am not aware of any official NIS2 or GDPR or DORA courses that would say I'm now a NIS2 expert. I think what the competent authorities will be looking for will be, can you demonstrate to them that your staff and your senior management, etc., have been appropriately trained in cybersecurity and what their obligations are under NIS2 and indeed any other regulations like so yeah, I do, because I do see a lot. I do see, NIS2 certified courses coming out, and I'm going, okay, I'm not aware of the EU or any official government bodies endorsing or providing those type of certification courses.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw that GDPR was around for a very long time before you even got something that's even roughly equivalent to that in terms of sort of
Yeah.
some kind of a certification to say, yes, we follow GDPR. So, and that was a good 4 or 5 years in the making, if memory serves.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I think you're referring to the Euro Privacy Certification Scheme, which BH Consulting was heavily involved in. It's the first certification scheme for that's been approved at the EU level for GDPR.
Yeah. So as you say, these things can move slowly. Maybe for the NIS2 equivalent, let's not expect to see that for some time yet.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, as the late great Bill O'Hurley, he said, we'll leave it there. I think we've answered all the questions. And thank you, by the way, to all of our attendees for
Indeed.
contributing those questions. Thanks to you, Brian, for an excellent presentation. It's clearly a very wide-ranging subject. We're going to be hearing, hopefully, a lot more about it between now and the 17th of October. But that was a fantastic overview of just what's involved, who's in scope, and some of the actions that we need to take to get ready for it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone for attending, and we'll see you at the next webinar again soon.